pardon the pun, you know, I don't know where he gets off. I really don't. I feel like I don't want to get too in depth into it because I'm arguing with, you know, pixels on a screen here, and unfortunately he's not here for me to rip into. As I say, you know, you can't cross-examine you're a lawyer here. Help me out here.
A ham sandwich?
When you do, yeah, thank you. You can't cross-examine a ham sandwich. But the bottom line with the children is, I mean, it depends on the family unit, and there have been studies here and there and everywhere that say that the quality of the relationships between the people in the family unit are infinitely more important than the construct of, you know, who those people are in the family. And my son's living proof of that. Unfortunately, I just sent him out with his babysitter, so we could have done a little interview with him and said, hey, you know, how do you feel about having two moms? And clearly anybody here can see he's a pretty happy kid. So, I mean, maybe it's anecdotal evidence, but there are plenty of us that can seem to pull it off. You know, I don't see how, you know, if God is supposed to love all of us, and again, I'm not coming from a religious place, but using his own logic against him, if God loves all of us, well then why did God create people who are intersexed?
Mm-hmm. Yep, very, very good insight. So, now, let me, before, because we're going to launch into the questions, and even as my intro, I was seeking help, and these guys jumped right up because they're very passionate on this. I want to give Michael and Ethan a chance to weigh in on the 3 or 4 slides that we've seen so far, and can you comment from your individual standpoints? What do you think?
Well, going back to the definition of marriage not existing in law is technically correct. When the Constitution viewed that marriage was a fundamental right, they took the concept of marriage from religion, from natural law, something that was God-given and, quite frankly, predated our country by, well, however many thousands of years you want to believe there. Mm-hmm. So it's not the only time in the Constitution that we have taken these natural law concepts, the right of self-defense, the right to marriage, the right of free association, the right to move about. These were all concepts that were constrained by other governments, but are in fact natural law type concepts. Mm-hmm. What's important to remember when we're talking about the gentleman that, well, I use that phrase loosely there, from the Mormon Church, is that he is trying to spin this to his advantage. Whether you believe it right or wrong, it's spin. One way that you win these issues is by fear-mongering. This is not about facts. This is not about logic. This is about scaring people into not believing the other side or into blindly following your issue. And the classic way of doing that is by saying it's for the children. It's been done in a lot of issues.
Of course.
Economic issues, funding issues, tax issues, marriage issues. So it's important to remember that what he's saying here is actually subverting logic and truth. He's trying to make you believe that this has a basis in law when actually he shifts it very slightly from letting you focus on the Constitution. Now he's talking about Mormon law. Mm-hmm. And I'm not bound by Mormon law because I'm not a Mormon.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And nobody who isn't a Mormon should be bound by Mormon law. Much like nobody who is not Muslim should be bound by Sharia law.
Right. He seems to be making a natural law argument from the Mormon standpoint, which that's their belief in their interpretation of natural law. But our founders in this country had a wider interpretation of natural law.
Well, it's very much a sleight of hand on his point. Mm-hmm. He brings up the natural law argument and then shifts immediately to the dogma of the Mormon religion, without letting you know that he's gotten away from a concept of natural law, which is universal. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have its basis in Christianity or in Islam or even in Mormonism. It is fundamental. It's natural. It's pre-existing of all dogmatic thought.
Yeah, go ahead, Ethan.
Well, make sure I don't yank the microphone out here. I absolutely agree with what he's saying. The fact that we're trying to litigate the natural law and litigating basically common sense, it's not what we need to be doing. I mean, I understand the concept that, you know, people need to be treated equally under the law, and I totally understand that. And I totally understand that religions have their rights and freedoms too. The problem is you can't have one thing dominate over one another. There's got to be some way to figure a way out and balance it out, so that people can have their freedoms and their equalities, and whatever religious organizations you may have can have their freedoms and beliefs as well, and figure some way to balance it out and make everybody happy.
Right. The Mormons have freedom of religion,
right?
Freedom to practice and preach whatever they want within their community.
Exactly.
And they are, in a sense, going on this campaign to say that this proposition is the right thing, to ban this class of people from having these rights, which are, by most people's estimation, equal treatment under the law. They wanted to prevent that.
Right.
Essentially, they've gone outside their own religion.
Exactly, and that's the problem we're having to face, is that some religious groups, and I'm not going to name names because, quite frankly, I don't know them.
I'm born Catholic, and a lot of Catholics
Right.
were very much for Prop 8.
Right.
It's the same kind of story.
Exactly, and the fact that we're trying to have religious organizations try to litigate, and granted they have their freedoms to express their religion, but they don't have the right to express their religion into law. That's why we have the separation of church and state in the first place.
Yep.
So you don't legislate from the pulpit.
Thank you, Ethan.
I've got one thing on this with the whole concept of religion. We're talking about the First Amendment, and people often refer to it as the freedom of religion. And what it really should be is the freedom from religion. The First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. In other words, Congress should keep out of it. That religion is religion, and Congress makes laws. Congress has no business dictating religion, which is basically the founding. Even though we have a Judeo-Christian ethos in this country from our founders, they also saw that we are not a religious society. In other words, this isn't Catholicism, where we are ruled by a pope. We are ruled by ourselves. That we are a nation and a body of laws of the people and by the people. So when we talk about this First Amendment notion of religion, the Mormons were great. They were just the face to put on this issue to scare people, because it is probably the most public religion that has been altered by law. And that is the polygamous marriage.
Yeah,
but it's important to distinguish the polygamous marriage that they're talking about is multiple independent marriages between a man and a woman. Okay, it's not to be confused with a polyamorous relationship where everybody is in this together. Which brings up the Mormons' problem with intersexed, intergendered, and same-sex relationships. In a polygamous marriage, there are no same-sex relationships. Each wife is separate and distinct in their marital covenant from all the others. So the Mormons were uniquely placed to be this fearmonger, because they can say, well, look at us, the government has changed us. But then they can also turn around and say, well, God told us we should change ourselves.
Something else in there too. Just to throw one more thing in there. The Christian establishment has not been particularly fond of the Mormons from really the beginning of time, and it's not just because of the weak theocratic practices, but again also because of the polygamy issue. And this, in my opinion, is sort of the Mormons' way to attempt to make amends for it. And I find it actually interesting, and I don't want to go too much into a tangent, how they marginalized the African American community, another minority community. Yeah, Bo's laughing because he knew I was going to go there.
Saw that black woman up there asking questions.
Exactly. And what's really funny is that all of the church representatives were all white. And nobody noticed that, well, the gays are different than us. But this guy telling us that the gays are different than us, well, he's different than us too. And apparently that sort of skipped their minds. But the bottom line is, it's a game. It's about marginalizing one previously marginalized community against another. And it's like everybody sort of goes up and down a rung as these things get passed. So, and I think they used one community. They sort of bumped up the African American community as well as some other communities too. It's not just them. The Latino community, obviously the religious community who are not Mormon, but there are some shared values there. All of those people got bumped up a notch on the backs of those who got bumped down.